But I did want to talk a little bit about program Open Space, a program that I have a history with and have such great respect for. And it's a really important example of the need for our state agencies to build resilience into their missions to ensure we're building not just for the next 40 years, but for the next 40 years, not just the next 4. So I've enjoyed my conversations. Really want to thank Secretary of Department of Natural Resources, Josh Kurtz, and the chairs of the Joint Committee on Program Open Space, Senator Sarah Elfreth and Delegate Robin Lewis over the last several weeks. Thank them for being open-minded in our discussions and their thoughtfulness. The Joint Committee chairs and I guess Secretary Kurtz also appears that they are ready to sort of take up the issue of what types of materials can be funded by program open space funds, specifically as it relates to artificial turf. I happen to think that artificial turf is not the win-win solution that many prior park directors believed it would be, and its costs are starting to be borne now by those playing on the fields and being injured or suffering staph infections, and will be borne by our kids in the future when they have to pay the incredible cost of disposing of the fields before replacements. But today I just want to focus on program open space dollars and their usage. So program open space was established under the DNR in 1969 to demonstrate our state's, quote, long-term commitment to conserving our natural resources while providing exceptional outdoor recreation opportunities for our citizens. And I don't believe that converting green space to plastic and rubber filled fields, or I do believe that converting green space to plastic and rubber filled fields is actually the antithesis of conserving natural resources. But I think perhaps even more importantly, it's time for all of our state programs to embrace the statutory mandate from Climate Solutions Now, which requires the state to develop plans, adopt regulations, and implement programs that reduce statewide greenhouse gas emissions. And of course, as we all know, per state statute, each state agency must review its planning, regulatory, and fiscal programs to identify and recommend actions to more fully integrate the consideration of Maryland's greenhouse gas reduction goals and the impact of climate change. That includes program open space. As of April 2022, Maryland had at least 380 synthetic turf playing fields, amounting to more than 71,000 tons of plastic carpet and infill, nearly 130,000 cubic yards of infill, and 589 acres of plastic carpet. These synthetic turf fields have a large carbon footprint, and their toxic substances end up as forever waste. Their plastic carpets emit greenhouse gases like ethylene and methane continuously through their lifetime, and that doesn't even get into the production of the plastic, which of course emits greenhouse gases. The National Park and Recreation Association has indicated that the high surface level temperatures recorded on these fields compared to natural turf have been well documented. So grass fields rarely get above 100 degrees. All of us probably grew up playing on grass, remember. But the surface temperature of synthetic turf is 37 degrees higher than asphalt and 86 degrees higher than natural turf. So that means when we are building artificial turf fields, with the increase in temperatures over the coming decades that we're going to see, we won't even be able to use these fields safely because they will be too hot to touch. So if we're going to keep our kids and athletes safe from burns and from heat stroke and more, and we're going to fully implement climate solutions now, it's up to our state agencies, including DNR. And I know that Secretary Kurtz is all over this. He's a new little baby who he wants to be able to play on fields, to ensure that we're identifying ways to build climate resilience into our state programs, including our local grant programs. So after discussing this issue with the Joint Committee on Program Open Space, I'm glad they've agreed to take this issue on, and they'll be working with DNR and our local governments to ensure that state funding and state programs are being used for climate-friendly green infrastructure and natural products. I can also say that in the future, now that we've identified this as an issue, I will look much more skeptically at approving funding through programs like Program Open Space that impact our natural environment in a way that increases greenhouse gas emissions and reduces climate resiliency rather than increasing it. I believe it's essential that we move rapidly to redirect our precious state resources toward building climate resilient infrastructure. And I think our kids will thank us for it. So thank you so much, Mr. Governor. Thank you to Baltimore County and to Secretary Kurtz. Thanks.
Hear, hear. Thank you so much. Thank you. And we definitely share your concerns.